Hello Internet and welcome to the Collective Arcana. We're a channel all about tabletop gaming. My name is Wyatt, and today we're going to be talking about the Dark Archive, the new rulebook for Pathfinder Second Edition. If you like this type of content, don't forget to like and subscribe so we know to make more of it. So, what is the Dark Archive? The Dark Archive is exactly what I said, the latest book for the Pathfinder Second Edition role-playing game. It's going to be a lot like Secrets of Magic and Guns of Gears in that it's going to add a whole bunch of thematic options and tools for your campaign. But unlike them, it's going to have a much more spooky sort of bend to it. What I mean by that is you should pick this up if you're at all interested in things like Call of Cthulhu, Stranger Things, The Witcher, Supernatural, or The X-Files, because that's really a lot of the sort of stuff you're going to be getting in this book. Clocking in at 226 pages, this has a whole lot of really great new character options, as well as a lot of new stuff specifically for GMs and stuff that both can enjoy, like lore and things like that. We're going to sort of start with the player-facing stuff first, then we'll talk about it from a GM's perspective, and then sort of overall. So let's hop right in. We do get a new versatile heritage in this book, the Reflection Versatile Heritage. It is all about... and there's several different ways that it might happen, but it's all about a character who was born as a copy of another character, whether it's a magical clone, a mirror reflection, as the name suggests, or whatever other way that you have come about as just this perfect copy. If you do hear thunder, I apologize. It's a dark and stormy night here, appropriately for this book. But the the Reflection Heritage has a lot of great tools for basically impersonating anybody or sort of freaking them out with your ability to shift your appearance. And there is even a little sidebar about replacing the person you are a clone or reflection of, which is a lot of fun as a high-end, high-level goal for these types of characters. Next up, we have two new classes. This is really sort of the big thing, I think, for this book, but I wanted to cover the heritage first, just because it's a little more fitting with the ABCs of character creation. But the Psychic is the brand new spellcaster that we get. It's an occult, spontaneous spellcaster that, depending on your choices of subclasses, can either be intelligence-based or charisma-based. Now, what's so special about the Psychic is that while it gets very few spell slots compared to other full casters, that is, other casters that get all the way to 10th level spell progression with legendary casting, it has very powerful cantrips and ways, and its focus points boost those cantrips. What that means is that you have these sort of spammable, very powerful abilities. And when I say powerful, this thing hits really hard. Don't worry, we will go over it in detail when it comes time for the class video for Psychic and Thaumaturge, which should be coming up as soon as I can get them out. But just trust me when I say that this thing hits hard. A quick note about the Psychic is that while I think the class is at the peak of caster damage and everything, I think that the multi-class for it may be a little overtuned, and that is strictly because I think that getting an amped cantrip with just a single dedication is probably too tempting of a dip for most characters, whether they are a caster, a skill monkey, or a martial archetype, or a martial baseline class. It's very, very enticing, and I think maybe just slightly too enticing. But I haven't really play tested with the multi-class Psychic yet, so I don't have a lot to base that on. I'm going to wait until I see it on my table a little bit first before I make any final verdicts. But if you are running it and you have players requesting it, which I think you may get a lot of players requesting it, just make sure you take a look at it and decide for yourself and maybe, negotiate with them, because it just seems a little high. The next class is the Thaumaturge. If you like Van Helsing or Constantine, or perhaps most accurate, although certainly more of a deep cut Solomon Kane, that's really the vibe that this class is going to bring you. It is a sort of paranormal investigator type of a class that also uses magical phenomena very heavily, to the point where it can really mimic almost having a sort of Gish hybrid spellcaster in the party. A lot of broad options, a lot of really cool tools that come with that class. And their chief thing, in addition to being really good as a very interesting sort of support martial, is that they get an ability to exploit their foe's weakness, which can really lay the hurt on an enemy. We also get some expansions for existing classes. We get an entire new patron theme for the Witch, the Pact Patron. Pact Patron witches are really good at making binding contracts with various entities, from NPCs to more powerful monsters and things like that. They can repay allies for helping them and can really punish an enemy who does not uphold a contract that they agreed to. Next up, we have the Time Mystery Oracle. It's a curse that kind of ages you prematurely, until you reset it with your 10-minute rest and things like that. So as you tap into your power, you get physically frail as you age, and that's pretty fun. In exchange, you get a single action momentary haste focus spell that you can pop out. You can stupefy enemies as you show them glimpses of alternative timelines and stuff. So as usual with oracles, a lot of really fun, flavorful options. We also sort of scattered throughout the book, we get some extra feats for Druid and Ranger in a Cryptid section, and these are all themed around Cryptids, which we'll get to in a moment, which give you the sort of frightening or strange abilities that are themed around Cryptids and embracing the spookier parts of nature and abandoned, settlements and stuff like that. And there are a couple of feats for Champions and Oracles where they can sort of lay claim to an area by nature of their divine power and just sort of become sort of self-titled lords, as it were, of an area, gaining unique benefits while there and a unique sort of empathy with that region, that place that they have claimed. We get a number of new archetypes. We, of course, get the multi-class archetypes for Psychic and Thaumaturge. We also get the Alter Ego archetype, which is a magical infiltrator and impersonator with a lot of very method actor type of abilities. Would combo very well with the Reflection Versatile Heritage if you really favor things like Eberron, Changelings, and things like that. These two combined are going to really give you that feel and then some. And because of the way that Versatile Heritages and, archetypes work, you can still have any base ancestry you want and any base class that you want and still tack on that changeling sort of vibe. We also get a couple of really cool archetypes that are all about sort of having a relationship with something more powerful than you that affects your character in fundamental ways. We have the Living Vessel, which is where you are a host to something otherworldly with its own agenda. It provides some portion of its power to you, but it also must be appeased. And it has an ability where if you get knocked unconscious, it may rise and control you for up to a minute. Usually, taking care of any immediate dangers, like the things that, whatever hurt you. But then if it has time to spare, it will immediately begin seeing to whatever its own mysterious agenda is. To the point that it's even recommended that GMs typically take over your character when this happens. Although I'm sure if your GM trusts you, it even says, you can let the player roleplay it out themselves, but just make sure that they know that you as the GM may veto any action they take if it doesn't fit what the GM believes that other entity would be doing with its time. The other is the Pact Binder. This is a little similar to the Witch in the sense that you're making these contracts and these deals, but it's a little bit different where you're actually almost like a magical lawyer. You're looking for these loopholes and you're getting more out of these deals than other people might, whereas the Witch is just sort of making sure that they're magically enforced pacts. As such, there are options within the Pact Binder to have different specific pacts with different specific creatures and the thematic abilities that they may give you. This is something I really hope gets expanded upon, as well as with the Living Vessel. We get a few different types of creature that you can be bound to. And I think expanding both of these sections is going to be great for the game overall and some wacky character archetypes. One thing worth noting, the Living Vessel specifically calls out that if there are appropriate abilities within Pact Binder, you may want to pick those up. And your GM should allow you to take those. Next up, we have Curse Maelstrom. This is very, very thematic. The idea is this character has such cosmically bad luck, either from a curse in their past or, just happenstance. And for whatever reason, you're able to tap into that and sort of put your bad luck on other people or take bad luck for your allies and things like that. And you can sort of enter this curse-bound state where fortune effects are sort of a plaything for you, even if you're not the one doing them. Next up, we have the Time Mage. This is open to any spellcaster, and it's going to give you some like time domains from clerics and stuff like that, as well as some cool meta magic abilities and other actions. My favorite one is a meta magic so that the next summon spell that you cast, instead of just a random general creature, you summon a version of yourself from an alternate reality, alternate timeline, where you are the dragon, you are the fae, whatever it is that you're summoning. If you don't think that's fun, I don't know what to tell you. That's awesome. Next up, keeping with the time theme, we have the Chronoskimmer, and this is much less of a direct like spell casting feel to it. It's more of just like you have a knack for manipulating time, and you can definitely play it that way. It also works really, really well for just a character that you want to be fast. If you have always wanted to play the Flash in a game, take this archetype on like a monk or a swashbuckler, anything that's naturally also getting big speed boosts, and you are going to feel like the Flash. You will be bouncing all over the place, covering very large maps in a very short amount of time, and, functionally sort of teleporting, slowing down enemies and things like that. It's a really unique and sort of archetype that I just didn't expect to see, and I kind of love it. Next, we have the Psychic Duelist, and this is something that involves this new concept of mindscapes, which are these sort of thought form, sort of pocket dimensions, but not necessarily exactly. Sometimes they're spilling over into the real world. Sometimes they're fully contained in mind. Sometimes you can, and when you're trying to have a psychic duel, you're specifically creating one between you and another creature. There's rituals to do this, but the Psychic Duelist can do it without the ritual. You can sort of have a little bit quicker. And the idea is that you go into these pseudo alternate dimensions and you battle it out. The rules are very different from a standard encounter in terms of what you can do. And the Psychic Duelist, of course, gets an edge in these duels versus things that don't have the Psychic Duelist features. And it can really be a whole separate, unique type of encounter that there's really not anything like. Then we have the Mindsmith. The Mindsmith is essentially the Eberron, the D&D 3.5 Soul Knife. It's a little bit different. It's got some extra bells and whistles on it, where essentially you conjure out of pure thought a weapon, and you can empower that weapon and give it, unique abilities and, change its size and shape if it's a ranged weapon, that sort of thing. There are also really good feats to turn it into a tool or other sort of mundane object if you don't necessarily need a weapon. So it's a little bit sort of Green Lantern-y there as well, of just sort of creating these light construct tools and weapons. Next up, we have the Sleepwalker. It's this strange class where you enter this like trance state, and in this trance state, you can read or spy on people's dreams, or even jump into them and see what's going on, manipulate them through their dreams and things like that. You get some innate spellcasting and stuff like that to supplement existing spellcasting that you may or may not have. And it's really kind of another one I just didn't really expect. And it could be very campaign specific in terms of how useful it is to the party. But if you find yourself in any sort of an intrigue campaign or anything where you're dealing with politics and stuff like that, it could be really good. In addition to all that, there's a couple of new things called Aftermath abilities and Deviant abilities. These work a little bit differently, each one, but the gist is essentially your character, either through some sort of an event or, usually through some roleplay event or, maybe a big important fight or something like that, you have been influenced by something. For the deviant abilities, these are typically going to be things almost like mutant abilities where they've sort of unlocked. These can come from any number of sources, magical experimentation, as even from pacts and things like that. And it's something that you really want to be careful with, because every time you use these abilities, and they range from things like fire breath, movement abilities and stuff like that, a pretty broad spectrum. But every time you use them, you have to roll this check, almost like the inventors in what do they call it? The inventor's overdrive check. I'm sorry, not the overdrive check, the unstable check. So every time you use them, you roll a check to see if it's going to cause a drawback or if it's going to, work flawlessly. And every time you succeed the check goes up. So, and every time you fail the check, the penalty for failing again goes up, but it does reduce the DC back to the starting of flat 5 DC checks. So it's a risk and reward thing. It's something that you don't want to necessarily rely on, but it can be really cool, and they're really unique abilities, energy blasts and things like that you just can't necessarily get on most classes. But if it's something that you think would fit your character, you and your GM can definitely work out a way to get you access to those feats. I did have a player point out to me who plays an Oracle that it feels very much like it could have been an alternative version of how the Oracle functioned. And, we discussed the pros and cons on that for a little while, but I definitely think that an Oracle who also has this is going to be maximizing their flavor. The others, called Aftermath abilities, specifically happen after you've survived a traumatic encounter with something powerful. One of them is, if you've been petrified before, parts of your body remain stony and have that extra durability, good for punching and things like that. But there's several others, and they come in a wide variety. There's an ooze one, so that you actually, your body can become sort of translucent and made of like jello, if that's what you're into. So there's a lot of really cool character options that open up with these Aftermath abilities, things that, again, you just might not have thought were possible to achieve. And because of these, you and your GM can either work out a reason in your backstory to have them if you're already starting at a higher level, or can work in to make sure that you get the opportunity to qualify for these. The last of our new feats are skill feats. We get a lot of skill feats specifically tied to occultism that will fit with any paranormal investigation type of campaign, or anything sufficiently spooky that you're doing in your adventures that pushes on the edge of reality or what should be possible with just skill checks. They're very unique and very flavorful, and you should definitely check those out. My favorite one is the automatic writing one, where you can just sort of start scribbling on a piece of paper, and gradually it will give you information and help you with a recall knowledge check. For new items, we get a good selection of new equipment, from specific magic items and cursed items to specific kits for paranormal investigations or dealing with particular types of creatures. And so overall, if you're looking to outfit yourself with some new gear, this is a good fit. But of course, look for the Treasure Vault coming in Q1 of 2023 for lots more items. We get a lot of new spells, including some apocryphal domain spells, which are alternative domain spells for the existing domains that your GM may allow you to take based on if you're a member of a particularly maybe outdated sect, or you practice sort of fringe traditions within your religion, then you might qualify for these apocryphal domain spells. In addition to that, we get a number of new occult spells, some specifically tied to the psychic and to enable some of its unique abilities, but also a number of them that are just tied into time and general spookiness. We do get a number of new rituals as well, which, again, appropriate. It wouldn't feel right having this big occult book and not having some new rituals. Now, on the GM side of things, the GM-facing rules, each chapter is broken up as a sort of adventure. Well, each chapter is broken up with sort of lore, then mechanics usually for players, and then an adventure that is specific to the subject matter of each chapter. Often these are inspired by pop culture or other things that you may be familiar with. For example, there's one that is going to be very familiar if you like the film Midsummer. So a lot of really cool and just sort of off-the-wall adventures. And what's great about them is they all exist and work just fine as standalone adventures. You don't have to, you just drop them into your campaign, treat them as a one-shot, whatever you want to do. But you can also link them all together and just sort of go on this journey of with your players of, this paranormal investigator team and, what they uncover. Or you could just sort of pepper whatever one's in as you go throughout your regular campaign, and then have these sort of loosely connected in terms of their relation to this dark archive concept on its own, which is very much like just this X-Files for the Pathfinder Society within Golarion. But again, you don't necessarily have to connect them, and you can just drop them in as standalone mysteries. They work great that way. But they do leave room if you want to expand. Additionally, there are dozens of case files throughout the book that act as sort of snippets or adventure hooks or NPC seeds that you can drop into your game. Some of them tie directly into the themes and the abilities that you may have already seen in terms of the character or GM options that we have. Some of them are just sort of off the wall, just kind of random, again, pop culture bits. I really like seeing Terraria in there, which is a sort of very real, or allegedly very real, real world, I should say, legend, myth of this weird medical case of this person who was just always hungry. Like, eat whole farm animals hungry. In addition, there are rules for the mindscapes that we mentioned with the Psychic Duelist, which are, these sort of pseudo pocket dimensions / exerting will on the world to reshape it in a localized area sort of thing. There's rules about how those get created, how, things like physics and time and space may work inside of them and stuff. Treated very much like the Game Mastery Guide treats the different terrains and stuff. It's just a new type of terrain is sort of how it's treated. There is a fun little nod in there in some of the in-universe lore that comes along with each section. For this one in particular, with the mindscapes, there's a reference to the fact that we all live in a simulation. They say, what if the entire world is just some powerful entity's mindscape and we'll all be blinked out of existence when they get bored? So that's, fun existential dread for your characters. My personal favorite section in this book as a GM, though, is the Cryptids. I love, Bigfoots and Loch Ness monsters and things like that. Ever since I was a kid, I just, I really believed Nessie was out there. But what's really cool about these is, you think about a setting like Galarian or any tabletop RPG fantasy world. It's going to have dragons, ghosts, ghouls, goblins, all that sort of paranormal stuff. So what sets apart a cryptid? What makes something extra weird in a world that has, many-headed monsters and things that can breathe acid from other dimensions, right? So these are they do a good job of taking you into and talking about how if something is a cryptid, it's going to be, just a little bit outside the norm. It could still be a dragon or an owlbear as one of the examples, but there's something wrong with it. There's something not quite right. It doesn't obey the normal rules of an owlbear. It doesn't, fit the usual mold in some way. And so they give us 4 sort of templates, adjustments. They give us 4 cryptid adjustments with 4 different themes. I believe there's the experiment, the primeval, the unseen, and the mutant. And so each of these is going to tack on different abilities. Sometimes you have multiple options within those abilities, but they're all thematic with that special type of creature. And in addition to making the creature stronger, they also provide a lot of story beats and elements and ways that you can take what could have just been a random encounter with an owlbear and turn it into like a full-length adventure, building tension and unease with your players as they realize this thing is not behaving like a normal owlbear should and wondering what else it could be capable of. So what's the verdict? In short, get this book. If the themes that I've discussed here are remotely interesting to you, get this book. It is chock full. It is jam-packed. There's so much content in here, and all of it is great. Even if you're not going to take things word for word from here, just reading through and getting ideas for adventures and ways to mess with your players is going to be worth it. And as always, the art is worth the price of admission. There are some things I don't love. I said that the Psychic multiclass may be a little overpowered. Again, we'll have to wait and see. As I see that on the table, I could be totally misconstruing that. But I also didn't love the way that it was broken up into the 9 chapters. I should specifically say I did like that it was broken up into the 9 chapters. What I did not like was that each chapter had not just the player-facing options and the lore, but also the adventures in it, especially because these adventures happen to be very mystery-flavored. You don't want your players to get spoilers by accident just because it's not always clear exactly when a section is the adventure and when it's just another section of player options. So for that reason, it can be a little unwieldy to just hand over to your players. I think it would have been a lot better if they were in the back, because then you'd have a lot less honest mistakes. Still people would, players who want to spoil things for themselves might still, but no one's going to do it on accident if they're more separated like that. And this is something that we saw them do with Guns and Gears as well, but that worked out, in my opinion, a lot better because there was just the 2 categories, the guns category and the gears category. And so there was a lot less jumping around. I mean, there are a number of backgrounds and stuff in here that I'm not even sure if I remember all of them, just because they were randomly packed in, random items and stuff like that. And there is an appendix in the back of the book, like a special list, so you can cross-reference and find the stuff. But it's not exhaustive. It doesn't have a lot of the things like the backgrounds, for example. So there's definitely things that you could still miss even with that. But what it lacks in organization, it makes up for with stuffing its pages, really making use of every page in terms of stuffing in content, the lore, the art. As usual with Paizo, it is stellar work. The classes are well designed, the archetypes are new and exciting, and the number of character options with every one of these books that comes out just shoots through the roof. And as always, the balance is really tight, so you don't have to worry about power creep with, like I said, that one asterisk exception that I could very much be wrong about. But overall, I love this book. I've loved all of these sort of themed expansions on the core rule books that Paizo has released. And with next week being Gen Con, or it could be this week, depending on when we actually get this video out. But with Gen Con coming up, we're probably about to get a new announcement, maybe a new class or two, definitely a couple of new rule books, and we can see what the next theme of new options will look like. So that's it. Thanks so much for watching. I do hope you check out this book. I think you'll really like it. And welcome to the collective. We'll see you next time.